I have great reservations about zero-hour contracts, and we've already acted in Westminster to make sure that an employer can't insist on exclusive rights on one of his workers. So now a worker, even on a zero-hour contract, can go and work for other employers, and we think that's part of the way to reforming this. My colleagues in the Assembly have put down amendments to various pieces of legislation calling for zero-hour contracts in Wales to be completely abolished, and I would favour that. In terms of the minimum wage, we've increased that by 3% this year on the recommendation of the Low Pay Commission, but I think as the economy grows, so there is scope for increasing the minimum wage more. But there's got to be a balance between what can the needs of the workers and what employers can afford, because the last thing we want is redundancies. Certainly there are some multinational companies that are financially bigger than some small countries. And for instance, before the recession and the problems with the banks in this country in 2008, some people said that Barclays actually was bigger than the UK if you looked at its reach right across nations. I think that's unhealthy, and certainly we're imposing new regulations to make sure that companies are more accountable to the countries in which they operate. The HSBC incident is another example of malpractice by banks. If it's not the interest rate swaps, it's the LIBOR scandal as well. So we've had to ensure that we've got enough powers to actually find out where this money is, where people are hiding it away from the HMRC, from the British government, and we must go after that money and ensure that all the tax that is payable is paid. In terms of the large companies like Amazon and Costa, they must not be allowed to hide their profits in low tax countries and only put very minimal of profits in here, or even losses. So they must pay tax in the country in which they're operating and in which they generate profits. Now, Danny Alexander has brought forward legislation to ensure that it's not only illegal to avoid tax and evade tax, but it's also illegal for an individual to give support and advice to people who are intent on avoiding and evading tax as well. So our new legislation really bears down on these people, and I hope there will not be an HSBC incident again. Well, I certainly couldn't do my job as Member of Parliament for Brecon and Radnorshire and have a second job as well. That would be impossible. I think MPs should be allowed to have second jobs, but they must make that clear to the public in general and to their constituents. It's okay for MPs to have interests outside, but they should be minimal in terms of the amount of time they spend on them. Well, can I say first of all that the coalition government has reduced our deficit, that's our yearly amount of money that we have to borrow, from about 170 billion to 70 billion, and that's a great result for the coalition government. But still our national debt is accruing, and the government has to find money from individuals or corporations or banks in order to sustain that borrowing. So they issue bonds, and luckily at the moment interest rates are relatively low. But they can issue those bonds either to individuals, to corporations, or indeed to banks as well. But the government has to pay interest on those bonds, and will have to redeem them in the future as well.